A man accused of using social media apps to find women so he could sexually assault them and their daughters. Now, investigators say they think there are more victims out there. You know, we've all probably had a night out where we had one too many drinks and woke up the next morning feeling awful. And you've probably wondered why there isn't something we could take to help us not feel quite as bad the next morning. I'm here to tell you there is a product that you can use to make you not feel quite as bad. This is it. It's called ZBiotics. ZBiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. PhD scientists invented it to tackle those rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best the next morning. If you want to try ZBiotics, you can get a discount. Log on to zbiotics.com/sidebar to get 15% off your first order when you use Sidebar at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Welcome back to Sidebar here on Law and Crime. I'm Anjanette Levy. Antonio Arredondo is a 37-year-old man who faces a number of sex charges in Oregon. Those charges include rape, sodomy, and sex abuse in the first degree. Sheriff's officials say Arredondo is a registered sex offender in Texas who used social media apps such as Facebook to look for single women. Deputies say Arredondo acted like he was looking for romance, but he was really a predator who would sexually assault the mother and then sometimes their daughters. Investigators say the crimes in Oregon are similar to the crime in Texas, for which he was required to register as a sex offender. The district attorney says Arredondo has been in the Pacific Northwest for several years, and since there are a number of cases throughout Oregon for which he's facing charges, they believe there are more victims of his in the Pacific Northwest. Joining me to discuss this disturbing case is someone who knows a thing or two about tracking down predators. He does it on television and has been for years. He's Chris Hansen of the True Blue Streaming Crime Network and the host of Takedown with Chris Hansen. Chris, welcome to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me.
Your first thoughts on this story. I find it incredibly disturbing. You're not only targeting women, mothers, but also their daughters.
You know, I'd like to say that it surprises me or shocks me, but truly it doesn't. And I'll tell you why. During our most recent string of investigations, takedown predator investigations, we've seen more and more activity in these different sites, social media platforms, where predators are looking for a daddy-daughter relationship or a mother-daughter relationship. And I don't know where it comes from, but there seems to be a perverse curiosity in society today, and especially amongst predators, for this sort of activity. And now we have a guy who takes it to the next level, who goes on dating sites and social media sites to try to meet, a woman, ostensibly for a legitimate relationship, only to take advantage of both the woman and her daughter. And I'd like to say it's isolated, but it's not. We see it all over the country. And in fact, in this case, as you probably know, Arredondo has allegedly operated both in Oregon and in Texas. So
Yes.
I think it speaks to a couple of things in this case. One, that how important it is that victims come forward to report this, and how important it is in this case, and law enforcement has done this, to put the word out and say, hey, if you've been victimized by this guy, please come talk to us.
One thing that I find particularly disturbing about this is the fact that you're looking for mothers. And obviously, if you're a single mom, maybe you're lonely, maybe you would like a romantic relationship, you'd like
Sure.
a partner. And he's probably, selling himself as that, a romantic partner.
That's
Then
exactly what
sexually
he's
assault.
doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
you
sexually
hit it,
assaulting
you hit it,
mom.
you hit it right on the head. These guys, predators, will look for the most vulnerable. We've got a case going right now that we're wrapping up called the Facebook Fiend, where a guy put himself out there as this new agey musician, and he targeted a specific sort of woman. Some of them had children, and he ended up now he's charged with sexually assaulting them and robbing them of money and conning them. So these guys know where the vulnerabilities are, and there is a whole group of men and women who are looking for some sort of connection online. And many people find it successfully. But sadly, the predators know exactly what's going on, and they know how to prey upon these women. And again, you have to be careful. Just because somebody says they're a great guy from the Pacific Northwest and they love kids, that doesn't mean that's really who they are. And it's sad that you have to be that cautious and that careful and essentially do your own background check on somebody before you meet them. But that's exactly what you have to do. And it starts with kids all the way up to adults. Everybody wants that connection. Everybody wants that relationship. And too many people are busy with work or can't get out or committed to their children or whatever is going on in their lives. And they can't go, to the corner restaurant or bar or wherever people socialize. People meet online, and the predators know that.
So, Chris, let's talk about, I'm a mom, I'm a single mom, or maybe I'm just a single lady, and
Right.
I'm online and I see a guy, he looks cute, good looking guy, seems nice. What do I do to vet this guy? I mean, you can go on and look on sex offender registries, of course, but how else? Like, what are the hallmarks or the red flags that people should be looking out for in these things?
I think if somebody doesn't have a stable home, if they don't have a verifiable job, and again, you don't want to have to be a private detective in a situation where you're trying to find romance or a connection or a friendship, but you sort of have to, really ask the proper questions. Where do you work? What do you do? I never meet somebody in a strange place. Never put yourself in a position where you don't have your own transportation. If you're going to meet, after multiple conversations, you have to go to a public place and have your own way in and your own way out. And there's nothing wrong with bringing a friend along too. I mean, bring somebody. Hey, if it is the greatest guy or the greatest woman in the world, you're going to figure it out. You're not going to lose any time on that first date, but you have to be very, very careful. And if somebody is asking you for money to travel, to meet you, or if somebody wants to stay with you on the first meeting, those are very definite warning signs. That's somebody who doesn't have the ability to pay their own way. That's somebody who is looking for a mark. That's somebody who wants to get inside your personal life before they've laid the proper social groundwork.
And really, introducing your children to somebody that you're in a allegedly romantic relationship with. I mean, that should take some time too. I mean, I don't think that's something that should be happening after the first couple of
No,
dates.
no. And obviously, this guy knew what he was going to do. He set this woman up, and he violated her and her daughter in the most vile way. We're never going to blame the victims in these stories.
Right.
However, you do have to protect your home, yourself, your children. And if a guy wants to stay over, or even if he says I'll sleep on the couch or any of that stuff, that's a red flag. Don't get involved.
So he's using Facebook and other social media apps, according to law enforcement, to find these women, to reach out to them. So cops should probably be combing through his social media, his messengers and whatnot, and
Absolutely.
seeing and reaching out to these women. I mean, they're asking the public, they're asking people to come forward because they think there are more victims out there. Obviously, that makes it easier if they come forward to you, but I'm sure there are reams and reams of information from his social media accounts that they can hopefully look at through his phone
Sure.
records
I
and
mean,
things like that.
that can be a difficult task, because social media companies aren't always as forthcoming as law enforcement would like them to be. But I'm already looking into this based upon Law&Crime and you reaching out to me and telling me about it. That's how the Facebook fiend story got started, and that's why he's being criminally prosecuted today. Is because these young women who were victims initially reached out to me because they were having difficulty or didn't understand exactly how they should reach out to law enforcement. And I, acted as a bit of a liaison to bridge the gap. And now he's facing criminal charges from Maryland all the way to Washington State. So, we're
Mm.
getting some justice here. It's taken time, but, it's great that law enforcement in this case is being proactive and putting the word out and saying, hey, if you've been involved with this guy, let us know and please come in and talk to us. I guarantee you, this isn't the only victim here. And I can guarantee you that if he's been in Texas and he's been in Oregon, there are going to be victims across the country.
There are several states in between, so we need to keep that in mind.
And where the guy lives has no bearing on this because the internet is so ubiquitous. He can be contacting women all over the country.
Yep, this is true. One thing that whenever I do one of these stories, it's so disturbing and startling to me. Whether it's this type of thing, child pornography, it's so much more prevalent than people, I think, really realize. If you talk to people who work in law enforcement in these areas, I mean, the world, it's sad. I mean, there are some good people in the world, obviously, but the world is crawling with these predators.
Look, just over this past weekend, we did a sting operation in Marquette, Michigan, in the Northern Peninsula with the Marquette County Sheriff's Office, Michigan State Police, and some local police departments. And in 3 days, 7 men ranging in age from 18 to 68 walked into our sting house to try to have sex with a child. And multiple conversations and worried about, is this a police sting? Is anybody else going to be there? And yet they override this caution, this fear, with the need to fulfill this fantasy, this desire, this obsession. And I liken it to a heroin addict. If you tell a heroin addict, look, here's some heroin, there's a 20% chance that it's going to be laced with fentanyl. Most cases, they'll take the heroin because they need the fix. The same is true with predators who have an obsession with having sex with teens. They know there's a 20% chance, maybe less, way less probably, of it being a Chris Hansen takedown operation or any number of law enforcement investigations across the country, and yet they show up anyway. We have guys in the chat say, "Is this Chris Hansen's investigation?" And the decoy says, "Who's that?" And allies their fears. These guys know who I am when I walk in. And it's almost like, okay, this is the part of the show where I have to talk to Chris. It's crazy, but that's the obsession we're dealing with.
I think we just need to tell women to be on their guard. And if they have encountered this guy, they need to reach out to their local sheriff's office, their local DA's office, their police department and say, hey, they put the word out. I encountered this guy and this is what happened.
There's no shame in being tricked like this. These predators are slick. They go after vulnerable people and they know how to exploit the vulnerabilities of everyday folks. It's a skill set that they have. And so I think a lot of these crimes go unreported because people think that, it's a half a world away. They'll never find them. It's the internet. It's hard to trace. It's not that hard to trace. Law enforcement will go after them. We did a case recently on sextortion. We have a whole big documentary coming out on it where these kids get tricked into sending a sexually explicit picture, and then they're blackmailed, extorted, oftentimes by con artists in Nigeria, and they get so upset that these kids end up committing suicide at a horrifying rate. And the kids are afraid, 16, 17 years old, to go tell their parents. They're embarrassed. They think the world's crashing down. And it's not. It's a bump in the road. But in that minute, that hour and 45 minutes that they're dealing with this, sometimes they commit suicide. It's a horrible tragedy. And finally, ironically, in a case also from Marquette, Michigan, working with the FBI, the Marquette County sheriffs went over to Nigeria, arrested and extradited for the first time in American history sextortionists from Nigeria and brought them to justice in the United States. So if you do report, if you do, get your case known and cooperate with law enforcement and get the story out there, you will get justice. But you can't be embarrassed. Nobody's going to blame the victim. You got to get out there and you got to report it and you got to talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the less it's going to happen.
Absolutely. Keeping those lines of communication open with your children, talking about these things, there's no shame in it. And we need to talk about it to take the stigma out of it and then make our children feel comfortable talking about these things. And heaven forbid it happens to them or us. We can talk about it. Let's put that number out for the Washington County Sheriff's Office. It's 503-846-2700. And again, if you have encountered this guy and have some information to share, contact either the Washington County Sheriff's Office or your local police department. Chris Hansen, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
That's it for this edition of Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. You can listen to and download Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, you can always watch it on Law and Crime's YouTube channel. Just remember to hit the subscribe button. I'm Anjanette Levy, and we will see you next time.